As Miranda Priestley breaks down in The Devil Wears Prada, fashion has a tendency to trickle down. And trickle it did. Hi there, my name is Tessa, and I spend a lot of time thinking and talking about clothes. I mean, I have for literal decades at this point. But back in my day, there wasn't as large of a community dedicated to fashion as there is now. So the hype around certain niche brands and the origin of specific trends just wasn't common knowledge. Nowadays, most aspiring fashionistas will recognize the name Miu Miu, having been introduced to the brand via their viral micro miniskirts, geeky glasses, and unconventional ballet flats. But this global popularity is a more recent phenomenon, with mentions of Miu Miu online quadrupling since 2022, something I largely attribute to TikTok. But did you know that the 2020s aren't the first time that everyone has wanted to be a Miu Miu girl? Miuccia Prada inherited the Prada brand back in 1978, and over the years, she expanded its offerings from old-fashioned leather goods to modern nylon accessories.
Prada, of course, are very well known for handbags. This year they've brought out, well, not just a plastic handbag, but a see-through plastic handbag.
The brand slowly grew from there, and in 1988 she launched their first women's wear collection. And Prada soon became known for their sleek and sophisticated, but slightly subversive designs. In 1992, she created Miu Miu, which was intended to be a more affordable, little sister line inspired by her personal wardrobe. While the designs were a touch more playful than Prada's, featuring a wider range of colors and more youthful silhouettes, the two lines weren't complete opposites either, and someone who shopped at one was likely to shop at the other. I mean, just look at these two 1996 ready-to-wear collections side by side. Pretty similar, huh? It wasn't until the 2000s that Prada and Miu Miu really began to diverge aesthetically, perhaps because of mounting pressure to diversify their customer base and increase their profits. Prada stuck to its ugly chic aesthetic that emphasized polished tailoring and took notes from men and women's workwear. Meanwhile, Miu Miu was more experimental, with a range of quirky, retro influences and unusual styling. It was basically the difference between a young woman entering the corporate world for the first time versus a little girl who still played dress-up in her mother's closet. Over the course of the 2000s, several products became mainstays of the era, like Ugg boots, juicy tracksuits, Tiffany toggle necklaces, and the Louis Vuitton Takashi Murakami collab. Not everyone owned them, but everyone definitely wanted them, or some derivative of them. This idea of every single person wanting to buy the same piece of clothing was a fairly new phenomenon, one that was credited to the rise of celebrity culture and the accessibility of the internet. And with a single successful product having the potential to bring in millions of dollars, everyone in the fashion industry set out to create their own golden goose. Despite being around for 2 decades at that point, Miu Miu was still stuck in Prada's shadow, and no one really expected much from them. But that all changed when they released their Spring-Summer 2010 collection, which came to define a very specific time in fashion. Released while we were all still feeling the impacts of the Great Recession, the collection questioned what it meant to be an adult during a time of uncertainty, with Miuccia Prada saying, quote, "This season is about freshness, about how innocence can survive in this world, and working out what it means to be a woman in this age of contrasts." The collection combined more juvenile motifs with workwear and cocktail attire, and featured several elements that would become staples of Tumblr-era fashion of the early 2010s, like giant collars, Mary Janes, swishy skirts, and skinny trousers. Even the chunky rhinestone appliques were a staple of the time period. We just wore them as giant statement necklaces. I'll be honest, I never liked how the collection was presented on the runway. It just felt a bit disjointed and messy, but I must have been the only person who felt that way, as pieces from the collection were seen on several celebrities in the months that followed, including Victoria Beckham, Daisy Lowe, Keira Knightley, Kirsten Dunst, Courtney Love, Eva Mendes, and Chloe Sevigny. Renowned fashion blogger Tavi Gevinson was also a fan, which was a huge stamp of approval for a brand that was trying to market itself to that exact type of girl.
I feel like if you know you're going to be in an awkward situation, like at a weird party or something, it's good to wear something interesting that people ask about, and then it gets you somewhere interesting.
15-year-old American model Lindsay Wixon was selected as the face of the campaign, not only emphasizing the youthfulness of the collection, but also its if you know factor. Miu Miu had had a lot of success in the past when it came to picking out up-and-coming it girls to represent them, and this was no exception, with Lindsay becoming one of the most coveted models of the following season. Whether because of its celebrity factor or its adoption by fashion insiders, the collection just spread from there. And for a brief period of time, if you opened up any fashion magazine, you were guaranteed to see at least one item from Miu Miu. As Miranda Priestley breaks down in The Devil Wears Prada, fashion has a tendency to trickle down. And trickle it did. Dupe culture in the 2010s wasn't as commonplace as it is today. So instead of finding exact replicas of the Miu Miu collection, you were more likely to find pieces that were loosely inspired by it. Fast fashion brands quickly realized that the most recognizable and manufacturable motifs from the collection were its prints. And soon enough, Zara, Forever 21, Banana Republic, Anthropologie, H&M, and dozens of other brands had their own take on Miu Miu's cats, swallows, and daisies. The swallows were definitely the standout print of the collection, something that I would attribute to the sort of vintage, whimsical, feminine feel that they had. And eventually, they became a mainstay of the emerging Twee hipster aesthetic, right alongside owls, of course. Almost everything under the sun could be found with a Miu Miu-inspired print. Skater skirts, blouses, even nail art. It was to the extent that even if you had no idea what the brand was, you probably knew at least one person who owned a knockoff. I mean, I myself had a couple that I wore to death, and I wasn't even that much of a Twee girl. Seeing the popularity of the knockoffs in the fast fashion space, Miu Miu wanted a piece of the pie, so they made the decision to revisit the prints for their Fall/Winter 2011 show. This time around, they went in a 1940s femme fatale direction with tea dresses and bold shoulders, making the collection a touch more grown-up and sultry than the Lolita vibes of Spring/Summer 2010. The prints had also matured, being less abstract than their previous iteration, and therefore harder to copy. It was a different piece from this collection that went viral, however, the cat eye sunglasses, which hit the blogosphere hard, and they're still sold by Miu Miu to this day. By the mid-2010s, Twee had fallen by the wayside in favor of sportswear and streetwear, and Miu Miu's Resort 2016 collection really highlighted this style shift. They brought back the prints from both Spring/Summer 2010 and Fall/Winter 2011, but moved away from the pastels of the past in favor of something bolder and edgier. Compared to the other two collections, this one didn't have as much of a cultural impact, which I think is a shame because they were actually presented in a much cooler way, to the extent that I think you could still wear some of the pieces today. But maybe I'm just saying that because I prefer primary colors to pastels. Now, with all of this talk of swallow prints, I couldn't not mention Alexander McQueen. Throughout the legendary designer's career, he made numerous references to birds, including for his first collection, Spring/Summer 1995, which had a handful of pieces featuring a distinctive swallow silhouette. Now, I don't think that Miuccia copied this concept, especially when you consider that Alexander McQueen himself was referencing Alfred Hitchcock's film. But they definitely do look similar. Initially, the Alexander McQueen brand seemed more focused on marketing their skull print, so when the swallows first took off in 2010, they were seen as a uniquely Miu Miu motif. It wasn't until a few years passed that the diffusion line, MCQ, began releasing items with swallow prints. But by that point, the trend had already hit the mainstream and was declining in popularity, making it less of a taste signifier than they'd expected. But still, it's interesting to see how everybody was trying to profit off of the same thing, with varying levels of success. Considering it's been a solid decade since Miu Miu last put a swallow print on the runway, I wouldn't mind if they brought it back for the 4th time. And who knows, with all of the teenagers from 2010 having disposable income, maybe we'll finally be able to buy the real thing. So do you remember this trend? And what other influential collections should I talk about next? That's it for this video, and I will see you next time.